Good afternoon, dear partners. I'm extremely happy to see you guys or and gals in such a big number this afternoon. Um, we've had the excellence program. Let me start by introducing myself. I'm Steve Noel, VP of Microsoft Sales and Enablement. I have the opportunity to get to know quite a few of you. I've recognized a bunch of names in a chat window right now, so super happy to be able to talk to you. I have my colleague Sylvain Fontaine, which is the Microsoft Security Specialist, Microsoft 365 Security Specialist at IT Cloud. Uh, you'll spend the latter part of this afternoon with both of us. I'll do the first part talking about the introduction of Copilot and the intro to Copilot and the opportunity for partners, and Sylvain will talk about migration strategies for those of you who haven't migrated because it's migrated to your customers to Microsoft 365. Very important part of of this, Copilot product is to actually have data in the cloud, and the second part is about securing your tenant so that once you've deployed this great product, that you're not surfacing or sharing a confidential information with users yet that you don't want to do. So with no further ado, we'll get started. A lot of content to be shared here. So mind you, I'm going to put a disclaimer. Myself and Sylvain don't have the Copilot licenses as of yet, or the Copilot for 365 as of yet. And the reason is very simple. And you're going to see it. I'm going to talk about it, and Sylvain's going to talk about it. It's not for lack of funds or lack of interest. It's just that we're doing our due diligence in security, or maybe not us, but the IT department is doing its due diligence in security, making sure that we have this product and it's not surfacing data that's confidential that shouldn't be available through Copilot. So that's the reason. That being said, I've used Copilot for Microsoft Copilot extensively, and we're going to talk about, and hopefully I get the opportunity to show you guys a few examples of how I use it on I said next to daily basis. It used to be I dabbled in it when it first got out, and it was called Bing Chat. But now I have to say that there isn't a week or a couple of days that pass by without me using it or doing some type of demo. So, what are we going to talk about today? Well, myself and I already talked about and mentioned the introduction to the AI opportunity, the value proposition for Copilot for Microsoft 365, and the introduction to I think I actually am repeating myself. So a little typo here, but you'll see plenty of good stuff. So the AI opportunity, Copilot is now available for all businesses of all sizes. I would like to add, I didn't mention this, but Sylvain will be monitoring the chat. So if you have any questions or comments, we're there. I'm sure we're not going to be able to answer every single one of your questions or comments or anything like that, but we'll do our best to get you the information as it becomes readily available or as we do our own searches. And hopefully we have a very dynamic presentation or training as we did this morning. We actually had this morning, I think it was, wow, over 130 people that actually attended the session. We have a good number of people that are in here already. So I'm looking forward to having a lot of fun with you guys and girls and ladies or men. I'm sorry, don't want to offend anybody. So let's continue on. In on January 16th, very interesting thing happened. Microsoft announced the release of Copilot for Microsoft 365, available for CSP customers of all sizes. You might have asked why wasn't it available from IT Cloud from the get-go. Well, we've actually had the surprise and word notified the same way you guys, the same way you were as MSPs. We knew it at the exact same time when they made the announcement, and they said that it would be available through distribution as well. So funny thing is, uh, as we found that information out, we actually had to figure out how to make it available for you, and it's been an extremely successful product as it's launched. Although we figured out the pricing and everything as you did, we found out some very interesting things that it was available. One of the prerequisites was business standard, and but I think that business premium, although it's higher than the prerequisite as standard, is the product that it should be used with. But the interesting thing that was part of Copilot is really understanding that the fact of the matter is it's one of those licenses which was advertised at $30 US, and somebody showed me this morning, I think it's a little over $40 Canadian on a monthly basis. That being said, Microsoft has decided to charge up front for the license. So if you buy it from us, it's going to be around $488 dollars for the year commitment, and it's payable up front. Just by show of hands, maybe you guys can, with a thumbs up, you guys can tell me who in the current presentation or has attended has actually purchased a license and has started playing around with it. So I see John has purchased license. Who else? Thumbs up if you've actually purchased licenses. Excellent. I see quite a number of people there that have actually purchased the licenses from themselves. I think it's very important because I had one partner I visited. I guess it was a couple of weeks ago, right after, and he told me they actually have a physical location. Very nice offices, by the way. Congratulations to that partner. And he told me that there was the morning of, there was a customer that says at their door saying that, listen, I need the license yesterday, even though it's only available today. So we had to hurry up and figure out ways that we could provision those specific licenses. So just just for the sake of understanding how the product works and be able to talk to customers about it, I would encourage you. I know it's not cheap, but it's well worth it to actually get this product up and running. Very, very AI. I mean, it was almost a year ago that I was at dinner parties, I was at brunches, and people were discussing. It was in the beginning of the year, even earlier than that, and people were talking about Chat GPT. Have you tried it? It's amazing. It's great. It's awesome. You should get into Chat GPT and everything. And it took little around 3 months for it to go from 0 to 100 million users. The only other product that I've noticed that actually beat that was Threads by well, the competitor to the X platform, formerly known as Twitter. Which grew um, you, their account, or active accounts, to all the way up to 100 million. But that being said, I don't know what it is today, but I can tell you that people have been using or actively being more productive with the ChatGPT platform, and it's been tremendous. We're going to talk about down the line, really talking about how different, or what's the difference between the Chat GPT, Microsoft Copilot, and Copilot for 365. So there's different products, different flavors. Um, so I know that there's gonna be some questions around it. There's definitely this morning on that. So 87% of organizations believe that AI um, is going to give them a competitive edge. So that means that 9 out of 10 of your customers understand that AI is going to have a part of their is going to be part of their future, and is going to give them the ability to be competitive, more competitive or give them a competitive edge. So if you haven't had the AI conversation with your customers today, but I'm sure that some of your customers had the conversation with you. What's that Chat GPT? What's that Copilot? So I know and I'm confident enough that by the end of this training session, which is, by the way, two parts, which the first part is today, next part is going to be on March 14th. You're going to have enough information so that you can have an intelligent conversation and furthermore explain to your customer how we're going to be able to deploy the AI services securely within their environment. So, bunch of statistics here, but the most interesting thing I think is the understanding that AI will boost your productivity. Um, I've experienced it myself, even though I don't have the Microsoft 365 Copilot for Microsoft 365, but it's the understanding on how much time are you able to save with you leveraging such a tool. The opportunity within the Office or Microsoft 365 ecosystem is humongous. We're talking about 190 million seats that are ready to upgrade to Copilot or an add-on to Microsoft Copilot. And that is, amazing because it means that within your customer, I remember, Microsoft doing a presentation a few weeks ago, just showcasing just the amount of additional revenue we can bring in just by upselling our customers to Copilot. Obviously, that's the recurring revenue. I think the real opportunity here is actually binding some of your services around that because the opportunity is there. I see. So I'm gonna there's a question there, right, Jim? I'm sure that Sylvain is already working on trying to figure out the answer there. So the Copilot value proposition, the Copilot from Microsoft 365 value proposition, there's a few. When you really look at the value proposition approach there, the all-up value, the value by workflow, and the value by role. Um, it was very interesting the way that I was looking at it when the the very first one is obviously the most which is the most obvious one is the opportunity or the ability to save time and be more productive. So the interesting part of it is I think that and I ask people around and because I don't use it myself, how much time are you able to save? And the answer is simple, tons, right? Because, what would take you a certain amount to be able to do something? And then there's going to be some statistics, and I'm going to throw the question out there. And obviously, I already know the answer because we did this webinar this morning. But one of the things that's very interesting is the quality that comes out, the quality of work that you're able to provide there. The value by workflow. So when you're actually leveraging and using this software within the software within the software suite as itself, right? The ability to synthesize your inbox and understand exactly what's the most important thing. The ability to synthesize and have more efficient meetings. The ability to leverage content writing within Word, be in either more professional. There's a lot of value there, and you're going to see specific examples in there, and also the value by role and function. So as you can see, depending if you're a marketer or if you're a manager, all the different things that you can do there, and I'm going to show you some compelling examples in the next couple of slides. So here, essentially, uh, how much time can you save with leveraging Copilot for Microsoft 365? They're saying that, the average person, will save 2.5 hours a month with this product. So question, do you agree with the statement? So you can say whether you agree with that, or You think it's actually even higher. So all the people in the chat, um, can tell me if you think it's higher than 2.5 hours a month. I've got a little idea, and I think that the 2.5 hours is conservative. But let me know, people that are in the chat there, how much time do you think that you think you can, yeah. So you've got Wayne that says higher. Yeah, just I would completely agree. Um, definitely, there's a lot of opportunity there to save. And I had, hey, Ian says 2.5 hours, not monthly, but a week. Wow, and Wade says, easily save you an hour or two a day. Yeah, I totally understand where you're coming from. There's somebody that mentioned, is funny that mentioned, hey, proposal time. I mean, can you imagine being able to turn out proposals a lot faster? That essentially means that you're able to answer customers quicker, more customers, and at the end of the day, it equates, being able to, make more money. That's essentially what it is. So, because you're able to do more in less time. So, in impact within workflow, and here you have, great examples of it. Run your meetings more effectively, right? How can you do that? I'm going to show examples how you could quickly catch up on meetings that you weren't able to attend, right? And uncover insights from information. So, one of the demos I was going to show, but I cut short because of the time that we have, is how I can leverage Excel to be able to, figure out and find more, um, you know important data, right? Parse through data and have it shown more visually. Content creation, quickly create documents, presentation charts, and tables just by literally asking and leveraging the tool to be able to do so. Email processing, quickly summarize long email threads. Um, you know, I'm sure you've been in situations where you've came back from vacation, you've took a few days off, and there's these threads and threads of emails, and you're like, man, I'm never going to finish reading that. And then you could just tell it, essentially, listen, can you summarize this information for me? And we're going to see specific examples of that. Now, by function, drafting as an HR person, being able to draft job descriptions or communicate specific policies, as marketing people, being able to identify, create posts, as well as create brochures very easily, just by having a few bullet points. Salespeople, we talked about, providing uh, proposals very fast, creating compelling and very targeted emails, being able to analyze sales data in IT if you want to, create project plans and things like that to make the rollout a lot faster. And if you're in finance, there's you can identify where you can improve your performance within your business and look at metrics differently. But I think that more than being specific and looking at the numbers, I think that there's a few things that can be said about not only quantitative but qualitative qualities of going with such a product and leveraging AI. Increase employee satisfaction and well-being. Very easy to produce high level of work. Very easy to leverage the type of tools that are going to help you, obviously, save time. So those are the type of tools that you want to be using. Improving your quality of work, reducing digital debt. I think that's one of those things that is not mentioned often enough. Very easily understanding that the amount of emails that we have, the amount of information that we need to parse through, and it brings a certain load. And with products such as Copilot, you're able to be able to do that and reduce the digital debt. A term that I wasn't really familiar with, but definitely I've felt it myself. So what do your customers want to focus on the most, right? They want to focus on growing revenue, Obviously building their brand and scale their business and scaling securely, right? Not necessarily doing that at the expense of their business not being secure. Most and most definitely Copilot for Microsoft 365 can be one of the most powerful productivity tools to help you do that. It leverages the large language model. So when we talk about Chat GPT, Chat is the application, the GPT is the engine behind it. So when you talk about the large language model, and we talk about GPT-4, GPT 4.5, GPT, I haven't heard, but GPT-5 is probably somewhere around the corner in 2024. But that's a large language model. Then you've got the Microsoft graph that actually puts, your all your makes the connections between your data that is sits in the different silos of applications. You have your Microsoft 365 apps, and obviously you have the internet being able to augment and give you, the most comprehensive productivity tools made available by men and to SMBs. So, what's special about that? I think that's when we have the conversations with the partners, and actually, I was at a friend's birthday when it first came out, and we're at a dinner party and we're discussing this as well. How is Copilot different? Because everybody's using Team. Well, not everybody, but a lot of people are using Teams at the office and Microsoft 365. They have that understanding, but they're trying to understand what's the difference between, is that another Chat GPT? Well, it's different, right? Because it's within your business context. It's leveraging your applications, your data, and it's helping you produce high level documents with that, right? So it's not taking information off the internet and you know, just giving you the information like that. It is actually producing information with the data that you already have. So we're talking about supercharging productivity, right? So I'm gonna actually there's gonna be a better job at watching this little video next, which is gonna explain how you can supercharge your productivity in Outlook, and the next video is gonna be in Teams. Somebody mentioned if I was discussing Copilot at your friend's birthday. They were asking questions, Amber, so I had to answer. So by show of hands, anyone have used this feature already? And you like it? Yes, no, anything? We got Emily that's used it. So if you have any feedback when you see some of these features, please feel free to write them in the chat window. I mean, that's almost Star Trek level stuff, right? When you really think about it, is the fact that you're in the meeting, and as you're maybe probably not being a super have your full attention to the meeting itself, then you have the ability to actually ask the question and say, "Hey, listen, I was doing some emails. Can you tell me what such and such person just said that was important?" I'm just joking, by the way, but yeah, so you can actually in real time to understand what's going on in a meeting and catch up. So we're looking at very powerful stuff here. So if you look at the intelligent recap, you have an example here. So, you've got, the chapters already created, you've got, markers, who said what, and you've got your meeting notes already been generated, and then you've got the prompts that you can ask them, and understand exactly what's going on. And that's built in to the meetings. So you've got amazing stuff here. Amplified creativity. So we're gonna look at Word here. So here you go. Super. So let's look at what it does on PowerPoint, right? I think for me that I've created PowerPoint for a number of years doing customer presentations. I think that would probably save at least a year from my life if I had a tool like that. So it does basically everything at since it's the best thing since sliced bread. I think that one of the most important and interesting thing about Copilot, all things being said, joking aside here, is the commitment to responsible AI that Microsoft has, right? So I think if you've used some of these tools, one of the important thing is understanding that when you use Microsoft Copilot, you actually can see there's transparency where the information is taken from, and also it's actually looking at being responsible. I think that if you've ever, I mean, I've watched a bunch of documents and documentaries, and I've watched exactly also read a bunch of document about if is AI fair, is it safe, is it inclusive, transparent, is it accountable, um so extremely important to understand that Microsoft's way of doing it is completely different. So Microsoft is the way of doing it is extremely is extremely is extremely, like I say, secure and sensitive, the way that they're doing it. I think that one of the things that you have to understand is that you can't necessarily take AI at face value. Certainly not today. And one of the things that I've noticed is that if the company doesn't have strong beliefs in place or guardrails, that it could easily degenerate. That's what I meant to say about that. So customer copyright commitment. So your data is not going to be used to create a model, give more information. It's secure. If you're going to be using, I think that somebody actually put out a very interesting text within the chat showing that, when you're using or leveraging Chat GPT, especially the free one, they're using your information to, populate, to model the information. So if I had any customers, I would most certainly tell them to use Microsoft Copilot. And here there's a distinction because I'm gonna show everybody, there's Copilot, and then there's Microsoft Copilot with security, and then there's the other one, which is Copilot for Microsoft 365. And there's a nice table that explains how to use that. So this goes a lot further and faster than I want, but I just want to show you Copilot Lab. So I think that one of the misunderstanding is that everybody necessarily is able to catch that as fast as possible. And some people are, they're just good at prompting. I've found myself, I can get better at prompting so that I can get more precise information as I'm dabbling with that. And Microsoft 365 provides an opportunity for you to train yourself so that you can eventually train your customers, or even just if you don't want to train your customers, you just want to send them there. Copilot Lab will help them better understand how to leverage Microsoft 365. So here's a little video that talks about that. I think prompting is an art, but it's something that you can develop. I was using that to elaborate. Um, I think it was last week. Somebody mentioned, "Hey, um, it's just again, it was a social event. Somebody mentioned, "Hey, have you ever tried to put your professional's accomplishment within Copilot and see what it comes out to? To write a small little bio." Used it. I've been obsessed with that over, over a few days, over the weekend. I was trying to get something out of it, but with different prompts, different things. Obviously, there's some give and take, because it takes a few liberties. You know, you might end up having a doctorate degree within the bio that it writes for you. But all that being said, that you would have to be able to craft something as good as it did. It would have taken me a little while. So, what's the customer journey with Copilot, and how can you, as a partner, help your customers attain and leverage that? So you've got the vision and value. First and foremost, what are the use cases within the business, and that's the, yeah, quote unquote, the selling portion of it, right? Because a lot of customers are just not going to understand the power of it. Um, I think it's important for partners to have this conversation, but because there's gonna come a time where somebody is gonna talk, was gonna knock at your customer's door and is gonna have that verbiage and that conversation, and your customer is gonna be flabbergasted. Even that customer that you think that they're never going to look at that because they're never going to fork over $500. if you show them the value and how much time this is actually going to save, then it's going to be completely different. They're going to understand that that $500 is a game changer. It's not even an investment. It's well, yeah, to some extent it is investment, but it's going to be worth so much more to be able to use a tool like this one. Assess and prepare. I'm going to talk about a optimization tool to be able to do a quick assessment and understand what needs to be done in the environment so that you've got some security policies in place. Purchase, deploy, and expand. Yeah, obviously, you want to purchase it, then you need to deploy. There's some few configurations. If this is the first of two sessions and possibly even three, depending on if you want to continue the process with us, you can, take an appointment and do a one-on-one with one of our Microsoft specialists. And what's going to be very interesting out of that is understanding that hey, listen, there's some configurations to be done in the admin center to be able to deploy Copilot for Microsoft 365, and certainly in the next, on March, I think March 14th, which is our next excellence program training session, you're going to get that part of it. Adopt and usage. So I think that with something as powerful as that, you want to be able to support your customer through the changes that's going on in their organization and be able to offer services around that. And if you're also have some development chops, to be able to extend Copilot to their, some of their other applications that they can leverage that amazing tool. So getting a business, an AI powered business. So, a few things that you want to focus on. Number one, for sure, you want to make sure that your customers, understand how to use these tools. And I'm going to talk about, starting this journey with Microsoft Copilot. Not to be mistaken, I'm saying Copilot, 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 but we're literally talking about different products here. The artist formerly known as Bing Chat Enterprise. So I'm going to show you guys a little example. I've been playing around with it and seeing what's the best example, a good example to show. But yeah, you've got your Microsoft Copilot. And previously, there was somebody that mentioned something in the chat that was very great. And it was the fact that they're asking, can you use Copilot from Microsoft 365 can be used to create documents that have nothing to do with your tenant data, or is another flavor of Copilot required to do that? And I was asked by Bob, and I was saying, hey, you've got to use Microsoft Copilot for that. And this is what I'm talking about. So if you've been in Bing and you've used the Bing chat, which is now called Microsoft Copilot, I've actually have it on my Android phone, and I understand it's also available for the iPhone. But yeah, if you use that, then that's the conversational, or you can use it to generate, images. You could use it to generate, text, documents, summarize a bunch of things. And I think that is the first step that you want to get started. So it's commercial because it's fully integrated, and it gives you access to GPT-4 for text and DALL-E 3 for images. So these are the latest AI models. If you're using ChatGPT, you're on 3.5 because you're most likely using the free version. I said virgin. Sorry about that. Hopefully I didn't offend anyone. Um, so included in Entra ID, so it's integrated with Entra ID. So no one can actually access it. So then you've got the most powerful, and also it's transparent and current. Some of these LLMs, what do they have? You're actually using stuff that was on the internet last year. This is more up to date. So you've got, it sparse through and finds information. Um, so the efficiencies of leveraging Copilot. So these are the features that you have, and most of your customers already have, right? So you're already able to summarize a long PDF. So I haven't tried this yet, but I've been tempted to take some look at some of these U laws and some of these sophisticated contracts by lawyers and putting them in there and saying, hey, what should I look for in there? Well, I wouldn't replace my lawyer just yet, but I'd be tempted to see if how much I'm overpaying. Drafting emails, obviously, social, generating images, uh, you know, finding out information and getting answers to complex questions. Uh, that's great stuff. People ask what is it? Where is it available? So if you have an enterprise SKU or business standard, business premium, you have access to that. Future legibility will be with Entra ID. So whenever if you're sync or if you have a Microsoft account, you're going to be that's going to be available for you. To be honest, I've only been using the this one ever since Microsoft has released that and showed that you're using it's your information secure and you're necessarily not leveraging they're not using your data to actually build the model or train the model. I was very happy about that. I wouldn't want some information I'm crunching, I put in the model, and then somebody else is taking that information, because I don't know if you've seen some of the things that this can do. And I'm going to show a particular example, and you're going to see how it could become very interesting and tricky. So, partner opportunity for new and existing customer, leveraging Intunes to secure, devices and browsers so that they're not accessing different AI tools. Drive change management, so show people how to use prompts. And upsell. Prepare your customers to use these plans so eventually they're ready for Copilot for Microsoft 365. So that's the money slide. That's the one I like. That's the one that explains it. So as you can see, you've got the Copilot, which is a personal, which is not tied into Microsoft 365, so that it doesn't give you commercial data protection. So that's the one that you have directly from Bing. Go to the page. I'm gonna share my screen in a few minutes, and you're gonna understand. Then you've got the Copilot with commercial data protection. So this is the one that most of your customers with the standard and business premium licenses already have, and there it's available. And then the ones that have paid the $30 a month US, $40.67, I think Canadian. That's what it is, times 12, so $488. They're getting Copilot for Microsoft 365. Different offerings for different people. This is free. This is included, and this is extra. Sorry, let me use the pen here. Let's say this is free. This is included. This is an add-on. That's cool. So, and So let's look at a Microsoft Copilot demo. I think that I'm not going to show anything that's super exciting here, but I think that it would be more dynamics for me to share this. So um, let me share my monitor here. So, surprisingly enough, there's some people that have never used this tool. So I think it's interesting to be able to demo and show what you can do with that. So if you can, everybody can give me a thumbs up when they're able to see my screen. So just Christy and Emily, right? Okay. Thank you, Travis. I appreciate. Okay, so just the prompt here. First things first. Um, you have, if you're using the Edge browser, you have this. This is the Copilot, and then you've got your little bar there. I've actually decided to pull it in full screen so that everybody is able to see. And I've I've been busy. So let's just say here and just go, I'm an MSP. What are the top services I can offer my SMB customers when deploying Microsoft 365 Business Premium? So essentially, hey, we're trying to build an offering for SMB customers. So let's see what it comes to. What are the things I can offer? So number one service you see, as you can see, you've got your migration and deployment. You've got your security and compliance and your productivity and collaboration and monitoring and optimization. Right. So four services. I can go deeper than that, right? So I've got the four services that we can offer. So these are, I guess I can put this. How can I monitor and optimize optimize Microsoft 365 Business Premium for my customers? That's interesting. I like the last one. Working with a CSP partner to regularly assess and optimize your customers' Microsoft 365 licenses. Yeah, so there's, as you guys can see, I could go, you know, and define and refine my prompts to get a lot more information. To be honest, I think that's a little marketing, a little too marketing, but I've actually known some people that have used it to create deployment plans or create proposals and things like that. So there's, quite a bit of things that you can do. That and you can, depending on what are the functionalities that you want to leverage there. You think that is that it? You can you can actually choose if you want it to be more verbose. I know that when I use when I use this here, I can more creative, balance, more precise. I can ask it to, compose. But the most important thing I want to talk about here is the fact that it's protected here. And you can see that also here it's protected. And you can see that I've got my work account that's linked to it. And that's the most important thing when you think about that is the fact that none of this, well, this is not sensitive information, but if I were to use information or, it wouldn't be used to, it wouldn't be used by the large language model to, to provide more information to other people that might ask the same question, right? So you can get better at prompting. So that's why one of the things I suggest is using the using the Copilot Prompt Lab, and my mileage varies depending on how I use it, how effective I am at using it. So let me continue, and I'm going to resume to the proper slide there. So your foundation is obviously is Microsoft 365. There's no, way around it. I know that Microsoft is gonna, in a few slides, we're gonna be talking about um, business standard. I think that it's the entry to leveraging Copilot, but I really don't think that it's the right product. And uh, fortunately, Sylvan's going to talk about that in more details. But you've got your zero trust foundation. Your identity protection, your identity protection, your defender for business for your endpoint protection. You've got your defender for Office 365, Azure information protection to protect your data. And then you have your endpoint management, right? So you've got your Intune, you've got your Lighthouse, um, and then all the productivity suite, right? That's all included in there. So that's your base, that's your foundation. So what's the opportunity? Well, the opportunity is, bring brand new customers to the cloud, right? Migrate current customers and on-prem servers, and the file shares that are using file storage that are local. So I have conversations with partners all the time, and they're using legacy file servers, right? On servers themselves instead of leveraging SharePoint, OneDrive, Teams, so that you're able to leverage eventually Copilot for Microsoft 365. So haven't changed the pricing here. Hasn't looked like that in a long time. That's even US pricing. So that's $17 and that's 29.60. So close to $30 for business premium, but it's well worth it if you've gotten the opportunity to see any presentation from me and Sylvain. We do the breakdown showing the value proposition of business premium, but specifically for the presentation today, um, what you want to protect your users from is data leakage, right? So with business premium, you're able to, apply sensitivity labels and restrict permission, in Microsoft 365 and use information rights management. So what are the things I can do with that? Even, set retention labels and policies for emails. So essentially, Sylvan is going to talk about that some in this presentation, but he's going to do a lot more in the next one. It's essentially understanding that, if data is not tagged as confidential or, if it's not encrypted, there are ways to actually co-pilot to get the information. So you have to be very careful before you release it at customers. You have to let them know that the product, although it's extremely strong, it's in some cases even too powerful, right? If you don't put the right things in place. So if you're familiar with data loss prevention, if you're familiar with Azure information protection, we've given courses on that, but more information on applying these things properly so that sensitive information doesn't surface from a copilot to people that don't have access to it. So here, as you can see, with M365 Business Standard, it says essential security controls. The essential is not enough. What you need is a comprehensive security controls, right? Because you want to be able to apply conditional access, terms of use policies, protect sensitive data from being exfiltrated. So essentially, people can't download and not download, I'm sorry, find information easily, restrict saving business data files or approve applications only, right? So these are things that you can do and apply e-discovery, litigation hold, and retention policies. So what do you have to look for? Specifically look at identifying confidential data, right? So stuff that HR and personal information. You don't want that to be accessible through Copilot, right? Somebody has a crush on a colleague, and being able to find their phone number, being able to find their address, that would be problematic. Customer data, yeah, you want to protect, if you have social security numbers, if you have credit card numbers, obviously, hopefully nobody shares that on SharePoint or anything like that. They're using a system that's fully encrypted to do that. But if at all, you want to protect that type of data, and obviously the supplier data, you don't want that falling into employees' hands and be able to share that. That would be catastrophic for the business. So building a successful CSP Copilot for Microsoft 365, you've got all these different services. You've got the advisory service, Copilot readiness, deployment, adoption and change management, and extensibility and ongoing services. These There's a lot of opportunities in every single one of these. The advisory, so as far as I'm concerned, it's being able to, it's more of the consulting that's there. The readiness, obviously, we talked about it. There's some very interesting documentation that we can share with you. And the deployment, you guys are very familiar with that. I think that the money on the table that a lot of partners are leaving is this one here. I've heard, the partners are successful with that. They have great relationship with their customers, and they're able to, add tremendous amount of value within the customer relationship for them in terms of revenue, but also in terms of the customer being more loyal to them because they're providing more and more sophisticated services. So 3 steps: you've got your pre-sale services, you've got your deployment services, and you've got your post-sale services, right? So pre-sale services, easy stuff. It's helping your customers preparing to get to the hero SKUs. Evaluation, maybe, show your customers how to use this and offer AI readiness services. So things that your customer need to get ready. AI readiness services, you see data protection and restriction, data structuring, foundational productivity and deployment, AI readiness evaluation. I have to say that when it's like that, it's basically Chinese that they're saying. But if I were to translate in this in English, AI readiness evaluation is understanding if people are ready to use these tools, right? So maybe, hey, have you written prompts? Are you using, Copilot for Microsoft 365? Foundational productivity is deployment, is making sure that your customers are using Teams, making sure your customers are using SharePoint, OneDrive, they're using obviously Outlook, email, and just a little note there. If you're using Outlook, I think that one of the requirements for Copilot for Microsoft 365 is using the new Outlook to get the best results. And then here you've got your data structuring, understanding where your data is, and putting it in the right place. And then you've got your data protection. So you've got your security and restrictions and your compliance. So there's this great resource, Copilot Optimization Assessment. There's an Excel document that we're going to put in also on the website. Let me share that with you really fast so that I actually shared it with the partners. So let me know if you see my screen here. Thumbs up, thumbs up, thumbs up. I can always count on Travis. Thank you, Ian. Unfortunately, I've lost Emily, and this was Emily that kept on. So and John. All right, perfect. Okay, so here, you see this document. It's going to be available. We're going to give you a copy of this document. But as you can see, you've got some, some guidance and some instructions on how to use that. And here, you've got your Copilot baseline. So it's nothing super sophisticated here, but these are core questions. And I think that once this is, I'm just going to go on top. It creates a profile, an organization profile, and data security, and it's asking questions depending on the choices that are selected, it's going to give you a mark, and you see some information. I'm going to go here and say, I'm going to go, that's again, the organizational profile, but very interesting things. Where does your organization and users store most of your unstructured data, right? So as you can see where they're pointing on premise, Azure blob storage, virtual files, virtual machines, SharePoint Online, business teams, other. So this helps you define a profile. And also at the end of the day, it shows how far along your customer is in their journey to getting, to being AI ready for Microsoft 365. There's the data security. You can see some of the questions here. Does your organization protect, encrypt data stored in Microsoft 365 at the content level using rights management? So Christy is asking if I'm able to get, or if you're able to get a copy. Again, for a fee, anything is possible. I'm just joking, just having fun. Obviously, this is going to be available, and it's going to be available in the documentation with the with the uh, with the PowerPoint itself. So yes, we're going to put that available. There's going to be tons of beautiful stuff. Um, it might take a little while. When I say a little while, because in between the two training sessions, the next one being on March 14th. But yes, it's going to be available. And what I'm suggesting is, yes, you can use it as is, but you can also, add some more stuff to it. And yeah, it does. You can't just play around with it too much, or else, some of the macros won't work. As I shown before, it was, this stuff won't work if you. And here you've got your blockers. Victor, you want me to talk about Copilot Studio? I purposely didn't put that in there because I didn't have time, but Copilot Studio gives you the ability to create your own copilots. So kind of the same way that you can use Power Automate and use Power Apps. Without having much uh, development background, you're able to create your own copilots. So Copilot Studio, instead of having a Microsoft 365 Copilot, you could connect the data sources and be able to leverage the tool and create it itself. I'm planning on doing a Copilot Studio webinar. I don't know when exactly, but we are going to do something on Copilot Studio. Yes, absolutely. Victor says I'm in also. I can't wait to do this share this amazing content. So let's go back and hopefully let's finish up quickly, or else I'm gonna take all the time my colleague Sylvain and Sylvain stuff is extremely important. So you've got your optimization assessment. So there's a layered approach to security, Office and Teams. I know that our partners are amazing, especially the ones that are uh, on this call, on this presentation, or webinar. So you're familiar with, you need to look at the integration and of leveraging all the great tools from the collaboration tools, right? Second of all, what you want to look at is, protecting identity, MFA, conditional access, and then you've got your threat management and your, defending your data loss, and you've got your securing devices with the Intune. That's the way that you want to think about it. You've got your deployment services. So yeah, easy enough. Selling Microsoft 365, targeting the right customers that are ready to do that. I haven't talked about Sales Advisor, which was also part of this, but we only have 3 hours. It could have just easily been a 8-hour session, but there's going to be more. I've got some announcement that we're going to make in the coming weeks. There's going to be a boot camp on Copilot. Oops, I said it. Hopefully, so we're going to also have well, drive customer intent with SMB briefing program. If you haven't heard about the SMB briefing, it's actually going to be part of this if you decide to opt in for the third meeting that you have with us. That's going to be a one-on-one. We're going to show you how to create customer-ready presentations on Copilot and show you how Microsoft is funding these and deploy Copilot for Microsoft 365, Microsoft Copilot. So obviously these are services, and the post-sale services are the adoption stuff and the if you have chops and development, how you can extend the platform. So driving adoptions, so you've got role-based scenarios to show people how to use it on a day-to-day. One-to-many user focusing on specific tasks, and also how to develop prompting skills. And here, leverage Copilot Lab and guidance on optimization. Examples again on how to build a practice that. So start with Copilot, use prompts to get started with Copilot for Microsoft 365. So I would actually go one step further and use prompts to get started with Copilot for Microsoft. And leveraging the Copilot Lab. And you can also build your managed services around that. As you can see, all the managed service opportunity on top of 365 Business Premium and Copilot for Microsoft 365, right? So you've got your support, your risk assessments, your monthly security updates, your security standardization, your endpoint management, your data access review, policy oversight, onboarding of devices and management and shadow IT oversight. That's all possible with Business Premium. So the top 3 premium managed services scenario. So you've got your data protection and restrictions here, your endpoint security, and you've got your conditional access and monitoring on who's logging in. So that pretty much ends my part of the presentation. And I will pass it over to Sylvain, which is going to marvel you with his technical know-how. So thank you very much. I'm just gonna go and grab some water and come back in a chat and continue with you with this fantastic group. So Sylvain, just go ahead and share your screen.
Perfect. All righty, give me a second here. All right. Let me see, and we'll put presentation mode. All right. Can everyone see the presentation? Perfect. All right, so let's get going. All right, so I'm going to look at the, as Steve mentioned before, Copilot is a way to, we use the Copilot service with the ChatGPT engine in the background. We use that to go looking for information that we already have on hand inside of our tenant. And the idea is to collect, to compile information, and from there to let's say to produce new results, to produce a presentation from different documents. But of course we need data for that. So as Steve mentioned, we're going to look at data migration because we need to bring that data into 365. If we really want to be successful using Copilot, we need as much data as possible. And so we're going to look as well at migration scenarios and the different tools we can use. And then we'll look at some of the pre-migration and migration steps that are involved in along that journey. So why would we want to possibly migrate everything to the 365 cloud? Now, we say cost reduction in the sense that the idea is to eliminate all on-prem hardware. in the sense that, you might have customers. This might be a very good opportunity to have a talk with them. Uh, uh, they've thought about going to 365, or they've started going to 365, but they still have on-prem stuff. So maybe the Copilot discussion, will be will be use that as a primer, and that will be the event that will trigger them to finally say, okay, I'm ready to eliminate all of my on-prem infrastructure. So the idea with the cost reduction is, we all know that when you buy a server, yeah, you need to outlay it, that outlay of cash, for the next whatever 3 or 5 years, whichever term you settle on. But there's also indirect costs to operating a server room, whether it be electricity and ventilation and cooling. Now, we talk about flexibility in the sense that once your data is on the cloud and your users are on the cloud, we can then add on extra services, whether it be through Azure, through Azure virtual machines, or other avenues that open to us, and as well Copilot being one of those, because now that my data is on the cloud, I can tie other options to it, other services where I can maximize the use of my data. Now, enhanced security in the prospect that Microsoft is spending a lot of time, effort, and money into making their platform more secure. And as well, they actively have people, that develop new security measures, implement those security measures. And because you're already on the cloud, and technically everyone with a base license, whether it's apps for business, business basic, or standard, or as well business premium, as a default, everyone benefits from Exchange Online Premium. So we already have security. Plus, MFA is available for everyone as well by default. And we say scalability in the sense that, we can grow, we can continue to add, users into our environment. We continue to provision licenses. It's very fluid and dynamic. And as well, we also profit from any upgrade which is done, to the platforms, whether it be security or features, because I have my 365 subscription. Therefore, new features becoming available, let's say in Outlook, for instance, well, they become available to me as soon as, in this case, because you have to accept to use a new version of Outlook, but those features are available to you instantly. You don't have to worry about, I'm running an older version of Outlook, now I have to buy a new one, or I'm on volume licensing, and shoot, I didn't buy the software assurance, so now I can't have the newer version. Whereas when you're on 365, you always have the latest features, available for you. Simplified management, and Steve alluded to that fact in the sense that, once now we have everything in one place, because we've seen situations where customers have, for some reason, have their data in Gmail, and are using, their files from OneDrive. And it happens. So the idea from there is, we can simplify you as an MSP. It helps you to simplify and manage that customer, but it also simplifies things for that customer, and that it makes it easier for them to use their information, because everything is consolidated into one area. And then we can start building links between all these different applications through Copilot, where data can be more easily accessible. And obviously, as we mentioned before, Copilot needs data, so we want as much of that data as possible to be on the 365 cloud. And when we talk about comprehensive results, we'll see that when we look at the different migration scenarios, obviously. But the idea behind that is, we should encourage customers to make sure that they have the most up-to-date files with the most coherent or concisive information within those files. Because if we have multiple versions of the same file, containing the same information but at different points in time, then if all of that information resides in one directory, and we tell Copilot, hey, go look in that directory, and in my OneDrive or SharePoint site or library, and create a presentation, PowerPoint to 10 slides and email it to so and so. If we do that without really looking at the results, and if we're telling it to go and pull up information from an area where the information might not be accurate, precise, as in components of that project have changed over time, or we've completely gone a separate way. It's a software project. We've decided to go with a different platform. So obviously the result will not be accurate. And as well, we've talked about that simplified management within that single data environment. So what are the possible migration sources? Well, Steve talked about that already in a way that we had that demo with the user for Outlook. We also should really think of moving group and shared mailboxes as well as archive mailboxes, because the idea is we're moving to 365 and we want everything that the user is ever going to need, whether it's related to Copilot or not, to be accessible for that user, as well as their user files, their shared files. If they have an on-prem file server, we'll do a lift and shift and we'll bring that up to SharePoint. And I mentioned collaboration platform, but we'll elaborate a little bit on that when we get to that migration. There'll be a migration scenario relative to that. So when we talk about user mailboxes, like I mentioned before, the idea is to you should keep the most relevant items in terms of age and content, because now it's not only the user that is going to be looking at that information in the mailbox, but it's actually going to be Copilot, because Copilot now is going to go through that user's email and produce results from information contained within that email. And here I have the link right now. Sorry about that. The text is in French, but what that says is, if you want to produce generated content or a resume, we need as precise information as possible to start with. So I will adjust this before we make the presentation available. So let's look at the next area of interest: group shared, archive, and email inbox. Now, this one is for at the moment, and this is what this, I'll adjust this other link here as well. What this one says is at the moment, Copilot is only able to interact with a user's primary mailbox. It is not able to go and scour through other inboxes, whether they be group or shared or the or user's archive mailbox. So I just wanted to put that out there at the moment, so that once again someone might say, well, why is it I can see that mailbox, within my Outlook because, I have access to it, or it's a shared mailbox. Can I do a search in a shared mailbox? Well, at the moment, no, unfortunately, it is not possible. But once again, as just a matter of daily usage, we should keep the most relevant items in terms of age and content. And for this one here, I did information relevant to a place for the user. I'll have to correct that. But in the other slide, I had as well Copilot. But in here, Copilot does not have access to it. So obviously, there is no mention of Copilot. Now, user files, OneDrive. So once again, the idea is Copilot will be able to access a user files in order to go and produce content from there. Now, whether we ask it to produce combined content from an email, give me the some way somebody sent me a recap of a meeting or a summary from a meeting. So you could say, okay, now I'm ready to do a PowerPoint from that email, and as well combine that with the latest version of the a file for that project. Give me a presentation on that. So ideally, that's when we need that most accurate version of the information if we want to provide accurate results. Shared files in SharePoint. So once again, it's always the same principle, because we're going to tell Copilot to go through this information, to go inside of these documents and retrieve information and produce, whether it be a document, an email, or a presentation, but we're going to want it to produce a result from all of these information sources. So if our information at source is not accurate, correct, or you know, properly written for some reason as well. Someone just made, little notes here and there that only have meaning to them, that they're not actual, structured phrases and that. Well, once again, more than likely, I would hope that Copilot would ignore that. But, once again, it's always up to you as the user of Copilot. And Microsoft called it Copilot for a reason because it is a co-pilot. It is there to assist you. And ultimately, you are the pilot. You are the final decision maker on whether or not you agree with what Copilot produced for you. And as well, and then we talk about collaboration platforms. So ideally, if this would be in a case where we're migrating, let's say, a 365 tenant to another 365 tenant, you would want, to bring along those conversations as well, because they are relevant content, because you're going to want to produce results from there. But then again, you have to make sure that, do I really want to bring along all these conversations, or maybe there's some team sites or some conversations that I had with someone that, are no longer relevant. So I'll just, do some house cleaning and delete that stuff before we bring it along. Because once again, if I ever prompt Copilot to go and search information from that data source, I want my results to be as accurate as possible. So now let's look at different migration scenarios and some of the tools that we can use. Now here we have some possible scenarios in that we can, go from an on-premise mail environment to the cloud. And as well, what we can do is go from an on-premise files to the cloud. And we can also do, I'm just going to correct this on the fly. And we can as well do hosted IMAP emails. Though we have that one there because there are some older mail servers that unfortunately are not Exchange servers, and these you would only be able to communicate with that email server using the IMAP protocol. So in that scenario, we have to use a different tool because of the technology of that hosted email server. But then we can go back to the more traditional, what we call the hosted emails to the 365 cloud, which that would be an actual Exchange server. But that would be, from a service provider, and we'll have a little more details on that when we get to it. And then I already talked a little bit about Microsoft 365 to Microsoft 365. Then we have Google Workspace to the Microsoft 365 cloud. That is a popular migration path for a lot of customers. We also have, in some scenarios where the customer was already using another solution for their user files or their shared files, but they were using Google Mail for mail. So in that case, we can use, a different tool just to migrate Google Mail to the cloud. And in other cases, they were only using Google Drive for their files. So in the scenario where we would want to move on-premise email to the Microsoft 365 cloud, we have Fly from AvePoint, which is used by the IT cloud support team. And I just wanted you to be aware is I put that mention of auto-renewing monthly subscription. That product at the moment is a product that once you purchase it, it will renew monthly. So it becomes important in some of these scenarios that you are able, to sit down with your client and see what their reality is and how many steps might be involved in the migration. And what will that mean over time? Will it span over a week, 2 weeks, a month, 2 months? So depending on the different products you use, there could be an impact cost-wise. So this is one of them where when you use it, it auto renews monthly, which meaning which means if you don't finish your migration, let's say in 1 month, and it will renew the next month. Yes, you can finish the migration at that time, but it also requires you to cancel it when you no longer need it, when your migration is completed. Otherwise, it will renew on you automatically. The other scenario we can look at is migrating on-premise files to the 365 cloud. For that one, we can use the built-in migration manager available in SharePoint. And that migration manager will give you different migration path. But the one we're going to talk about here is the one you click on file shares. And that way you're able to connect to your file share server and it's able to migrate that data up to SharePoint. Now that one is free because it's already part of the SharePoint admin center. So there's no added cost required to use that tool for that scenario. The next one is that IMAP email server I was referring to before. And we've seen that in some cases where um, typically I've seen it a lot where it's the actual internet service provider that the customer used. They said, oh, you know what, you're requiring email. I can provide you with an email service, but sometimes those are built on different technologies than Exchange necessarily, and those are somewhat restrictive in how we can communicate with the email server, whether it's the customer's email client or some of the migration tools that we may want to use to communicate to it so we can go and pull that email and move it up to the cloud. So in that instance, we can use the migration batch tool that's available from inside of the Exchange Admin Center. And I put that it's free because obviously it's already part of the 365 environment within Exchange. The other scenario is this would be a scenario where this would actually be an actual Exchange email server. So hosted emails to the Microsoft 365 cloud. We'll see this sometimes where it could be you as an MSP. We have some of those that have your own data center or for some reason the client decided to, use services from another provider, and that provider was more familiar with an Exchange environment. So the customer's email at that time is being hosted on an Exchange server. Well, if that is the case, then we can use the Migration Wiz tool from BitTitan. Now that one is a one-time purchase. And I mentioned there that license can be used at any time. When you purchase the BitTitan Migration Wise license, it is not tied to a specific client. When you purchase it, you'll see in your partner portal again a new product tile, and there'll be a redeem code that appears. You use that redeem code when you log into the BitTitan portal, and from there you put in your code, you redeem your code, and then the licenses become available to you, and they're used in the form of projects. And then you're able to assign, the number of licenses that you're going to want for a certain project. So they're not linked to a specific client. So you could buy them this month and use them in 6 months if you want. The scenario is a Microsoft 365 to 365 tenant. We see this approach. Um, One business decided to buy another business, and they decided to integrate the two businesses together because it's more simple to manage one tenant instead of two tenants. Sometimes it's a different area of the business that used to operate on its own, and they finally decided to consolidate resources for that business, whether they're interdepartmental or not. We'll just bring them all under one umbrella and it'll all be managed by one single team instead of those areas having their own separate teams of IT to manage the resources. Well, in that case we would use the fly fast fly tool from AvePoint. And once again, that is the one that auto renews monthly. Then we have another scenario, Google Workspace to the Microsoft 365 cloud. So in that case, that would be when we want to migrate from Google Workspace. We want to migrate everything, emails, calendars, and contacts. So that would be the whole basically experience from a user who is now presently using Google Workspace when we want to migrate them, bring them up to the cloud. In that case, we would use Migration Wiz from BitTitan. Then we can have another scenario where, as I was mentioning before, we've seen this before where customers, for some reason, use Google Mail, but for their files, they use their OneDrive on their computer. Now, this would be an instance where you could just singularly move Google Mail to the cloud, and for that, we can use the migration batch tool within the Exchange Admin Center, because as you can see, it has the option for Google Workspace. And then we have another scenario, the Google Drive to the Microsoft 365 cloud. So once again, that would be you would be able to move files from Google Workspace up to the 365 cloud. And once again, that's using the integrated migration manager tool, which is available from within SharePoint. Now we'll look at pre-migration and migration steps. Now, in the pre-migration steps and migration, if we look at the pre-migration, we'll look at scenario validation. It's nothing, that part is really not going to be technical, and you'll see that when we get there, but we're going to want to validate the number of users that are going to be involved, because obviously, depending on what scenario, what reality we are facing at that point for that migration, it's going to determine how many licenses of the product that we need to buy. And we'll look at validation of the migration tool, make sure we've done the proper assessment as far as data sources, product purchase, and duration of migration. Once again, depending on our products, and you can always contact IT Cloud because we're always here to help you. If you come up to if you have any issues, never hesitate to contact us. We're always here. All right, pre-migration. So scenario validation. So in here in the scenario validation, what we want to look at here is you've analyzed your customer's current situation and determine, which scenario applies to your migration. Obviously, you can only do that once you've made sure that you've correctly determined which data sources will be migrated. And that's where it's important to make sure that, you ask the client, and we've seen this before, unfortunately, where the client wasn't necessarily upfront or said, well, I didn't think I would need to move these files because I thought I could still use them the way I've been using them in the past. But unfortunately, sometimes it's just not the case. So there again, depending on the data sources that need to be migrated, it will definitely determine the scenario that applies, and it will as well dictate which tool can be used. And with validation of the number of users, so I was mentioning before, depending on the scenario we use, depending on from where we're migrating data, whether it be email or files, it will have an impact because, and as well, it could have an impact from month to month, depending on which tool we use. And I just put that little blurb in that paragraph. When it comes time to migrating an archive or group or shared mailbox, as well as team chats, but we'll concentrate on the shared mailbox because I know that scenario. And what that happens in that case is we know that the user was using a mailbox that was accessible by different people, and because it's a shared mailbox, it was appearing in their Outlook tree structure on the left of their frame in Outlook. But once we want to recreate that scenario within 365, but unfortunately the only way the tool can connect and go and pull the information from the original location and push it up to the cloud is we first have to create a user with a minimum of an Exchange Online Plan 1 license if we're moving 50 gig of mail or less. And then once the migration of the email has happened, what we do at that point is we convert that user mailbox to a shared mailbox, and then we can remove the license from within 365. It's only a restriction on because the tool needs to communicate directly with the tenant and it needs to directly access the mailbox in order to be able to go and write the emails in the mailbox. Now, you can also purchase a limited number of product in the sense that, you can teach yourself how to use it if you wish and become familiarize yourself with the product and as well familiarize yourself within the migration management portal, because once you have a license, then you can see some of the features that are available and how you could go about it. Now, whether and depending on the scenario and whether or not you do this, it could be an approach, for you to determine that, you made the right purchase and it was, in that case. Now, what I was mentioning this morning to the partners is you might want to set up a test tenant and through the CDX to the customer developer experience at Microsoft, and you can create a 365 tenant free of charge, and you can practice in there, and you could buy a migration license, and you can migrate email from one area to one tenant to another, and that would be a great way to familiarize yourself with the process. But if after that, you still require uh, you know, help from us, then definitely don't hesitate. You can give us a call, and we're always there to help you, with your migration questions. And now, like as I was mentioning before, depending on the duration that's envisioned here, it might have a direct impact on cost because some of the migration products we saw are not free. They are, sold by us. Some of them are one time, and some of us are monthly renewable on from the subscription model. So, you'll need to pay attention to that. But, once again, if you're really, really not sure, we're always here. Give us a shout and we'll definitely look at that with you and we can, give you advice on that. And we'll always be able to work with you with a migration project because, we want to make sure that you're on the right track. Because ideally, you want you want a happy result for your customer and we want a happy result for you and your customer. And as well, once we've gone through all of this pre-migration process, it is now, you're okay. I'm ready to go ahead. We've looked at it. We've talked about it. I've got the products. I've got a good idea. I know how many users. I know where the data is that I'm going to be moving. We've determined which tool we're going to use. But you know what? I've never done one. And, would you guys be able to help us? Well, most definitely, because the IT cloud support team is there to provide you with assistance, and they're able to. You can book a meeting with them, and you can schedule in advance your migration that right away it's going to take place on that day at a certain time, and you can go ahead and go through that process with no worries. All right, so this concludes the migration portion. Now we'll look at the security aspect of things. Here. Back in presentation mode. All right, hang on a sec. It switched screens on me. It does that to me once in a while. There, that should be good. Everybody can see my screen. Perfect. All right. So now let's look at the security side of things, as Steve mentioned this morning. Now we'll look at choosing the right AI, and as well, we touched a bit upon AI readiness. Steve talked about Copilot adoption, but we'll look at it again briefly. But the really the crux of the matter is really, from data security, information protection onward, where we talk about identity security, device security, and application security. Now, those three have always been present, and they're not linked with They're not linked with Copilot as per se. They're just setting up a secure tenant for your client and really, controlling who has access to what from when and where, basically. All right. So why is Microsoft uniquely positioned to empower a secure AI usage? Well, it's been developed and adapted, to suit their needs and their platform. So we talk about security being integrated because it's the only security solution that natively integrates with Microsoft Pilot. So everything that we can do security-wise to control access to, obviously, to the platform firsthand, control access to devices, and control access to information, all of that will impact directly, who and what and from where, who can, how we, Copilot can be used, and what can we do with the results from Copilot. And we'll look at that further in detail in the presentation. And it's, obviously I sort of already alluded to that with end-to-end security across threat protection, identity and access management, and data security. And it says intelligent because industry leading AI vendor with AI powered security capabilities. Because Microsoft has been using AI, it's not new for them. They've been using AI for years, behind all their security threat tools. And that's how they're able to analyze these large volumes of data of people, authenticating and accessing resources and being able to analyze behaviors. And that's how they've been able to develop and improve the security inside of 365. So as we mentioned before, we have our first one with Enter ID, where we have identity access and management. Through Intune, we have device management. And through Microsoft Purview information protection, which is a framework of how we are to apply security features within 365, and that's how we do data management. But now we have a fourth category that comes along the horizon here, and it's AI apps, because we also want to make sure that not only obviously we're going to decide to have Copilot access our data, but there could be others that without you knowing, or without the IT admin department knowing, might set up some shadow IT, or what we call shadow AI, and that AI might want to, with the user's identity, might want to access information that is accessible to the user. The problem with that is those AI apps are not linked to Microsoft security, so therefore, we'll look at why it could be critical for these AI apps to access the data resources of the organization. So govern access to Copilots. Obviously, we need to manage people's identity. And obviously, the best way with that is always with that single ID and managed. Now, whether or not they're only on the cloud, or they're using, they still have an on-prem Active Directory domain controller, ideally, you should think of doing a sync between the local admin to sync accounts locally with cloud accounts. So that way users only have one identity. They only need to remember one password. And as well, whether they're accessing resources locally or on the cloud, for them, it becomes totally transparent. Now we say evaluate login attempts based on the user or group membership, IP location. Now, obviously, that is a conditional access, and that becomes a very, very interesting feature. But you do need the business premium, because conditional access are found within the Enter ID P1, which comes with business premium. Now, with conditional access, we definitely can do a lot of interesting things. We've looked at that in previous webinars and workshops and boot camps. We can really limit not only past the authentication uh, step of giving access to someone. But now I can come and add extra layers of security. So beyond my initial security perimeter, which is my username and password, now I can come in and say, okay, I require you to use MFA, which we should all be doing. But I was just reading an article this week from Microsoft, and from their analysis from month to month, when they look at the totality of authentication requests that they receive, only 38% of them use MFA. So that means at the moment, there are still 62% of people that are logging in to the 365 environment only using a username and a password. But with conditional access, what we can do is this is a very common practice that we see when, of course, when the that scenario applies to your customer, is if you have a customer that they only allow their employees to work from the office. They don't, they don't allow remote work, and nobody, ever needs to access the 365 environment from home, then in that case, through conditional access, through what's called named locations, we can set up to conditional access. Not only are we going to, but we're also going to permit you to access resources only from the public IP is given to you by your internet service provider. So we can actually limit authentication requests from a single IP if we want, and that becomes very interesting. We've had other scenarios where we other for other customers where that approach is just not practical because they have other people on the road, but they only ever work from Canada. So once again, you can choose through and you create a name location, and then you apply that through a conditional access. So once the user has provided their username and password, they are then forced as well to produce a MFA to authenticate using an MFA authentication method, and that will only be allowed if they're within, let's say in this case, an IP coming from Canada. So once again, we've eliminated because for a while people were, I don't know, they were getting MFA fatigue where every time they saw a prompt on their phone, they would just accept it. But unfortunately, in some cases, that led to bad actors accessing the customer's, resources, because once again, that employee had decided to use their corporate username and password as a login to another platform because it was easy for them. They already had, they knew what their user ID was. It's their username, and they already knew what their password was. So it saved them having to create a new password and have another one to remember. So, but once again, the platform that they access, some of these third-party platforms do unfortunately become victims of security breaches. And in those cases, those credentials find their way on the dark web, and then they're used by hackers to try and access resources. Yeah, I see in the chat. What if you have an email address that you can't have an MFA, like a copier, for example? That is one of those cases where you would need to use an app password. Unfortunately, app passwords uh, can only be used in a couple of scenarios. In order to be able to create an app password for a user account, you cannot use security defaults. So what that means, if you still want to enforce MFA for all users, in that case, what you would do is you would have to go back to the manual method of assigning the MFA requirement to individual accounts, which you can do through the 365 Admin Center. When you click on users, active users, and then on the horizontal menu at the top, you have MFA per user. And in that case, that's how you would create or enforce MFA for those users. But for the account that's linked to your photocopier where you need to use an app password, then in that case, for that user account, obviously, then there would not be, an MFA requirement. Because the problem with the photocopier, not only does it need at a minimum TLS 1.2, since well, last year or fall of 2022. I can't remember. But the problem is the photocopier is not a human or is not a computer. It doesn't have a browser, so it can't open up the modern authentication window. So that's why we need those app passwords. The other situation where app passwords do not work is when you impose MFA through conditional access for everyone. In that case, you would once again, you would still would want to enforce MFA through conditional access, but you would just exclude that account. Actually, no, that's not even true. I think it ends up blocking it by default for the whole tenant. There's just something behind the conditional access where it just ends up blocking whether you exclude that user or not from MFA, that app password account. It will not, the app password will stop working, unfortunately. So it's a bit of a bummer, I admit it. But what we've had other partners do in that case where their customers, run into that situation is a service called SendGrid. Now, it used to, at one time, Microsoft used to advertise that service as a way of being able to still use 365 as a platform to send email, and it's really convenient. And I understand, in terms of branding, when you send out email, you want, that customer wants their customers to receive an email, that's using their domain name, obviously. It's just more professional than, using some other public free email service. But SendGrid is still usable, and if I remember, I checked the other day for a partner, and SendGrid is able to work with that because they support modern authentication. So their email service, is able to legitimately, access 365 in order to be able to send email. Now we have the second aspect, which is endpoint management through Intune. Now, once again, through the use of conditional access, this is one of those additional conditions that I can impose on a user. So not only do you need a username and a password, obviously, you had to use MFA, you had to be within Canada. Now we're going to look at the device that you're using, to access the resources. And I'm also going to make sure that your device is compliant. And for me, compliance, and I say for me, generically speaking, in this case, I'm only going to allow devices that are Windows 10, but I want Windows 10 to be at least at 22H2. I want it to be at a minimum version. I want to make sure that you have at least 22H2, even if you haven't done, let's say, the last updates from the last couple of weeks. I also want to make sure that your device has an active antivirus running behind it. And I also want to make sure that your firewall is up and running as well. Now here we get into the data protection side of things. So as mentioned before, Microsoft Purview Information Protection is a security framework, and from within there we use Azure Information Protection, which is what we use to apply sensitivity labels. More commonly, it's used for encrypting outbound email. We see that. I don't know if in the rest of Canada, but here in Quebec, there are a lot of customers, and we get a lot of questions from partners, in regards to their customers, where the customer, needs to send an email to a government agency, but it needs to be secure because that is one of their requirements now, is that to anyone communicating through email, the email needs to be secure. And the reason behind that is obviously that government entity, it wants to, well, make sure, but it wants to provide confidence to that sender, saying that, listen, you can send it that way because that way you can make sure that the person that receives it is truly the person that it was intended for, because before opening the email, that person it will have to authenticate to their directory service platform. In other words, they're going to have to prove that they have access to the account that's linked to that email before they can access the content of the email. But the other approach, which is interesting, as Steve was mentioning, is these sensitivity labels, where we could now come and apply these sensitivity labels, which Copilot respects, which is great. So that's where I was talking about. You have to be careful if we let other AI apps, uh, come into the environment and come and look through different documents and pull out information and produce a result. There will be no mention where those results came from and whether or not they came from sensitive documents or not. Whereas if Copilot does that work for you, when you tell it to go, go look in my file and produce, give me an update, or give me a resume, from that last meeting. I've got the combine those two Word files and go look in Excel for data on sales of the last month. And so when you ask Copilot to do that, if any of that data was contained within a document that had a confidential, private, or sensitive sensitivity label associated with it, the result will mention that to you. It will tell you this information came from this document and it has a sensitivity label, and it'll show you what it is, which is very, very interesting. So sensitivity labels permit us to do two things. They permit us to do classification of data. So, and we'll look at that a bit later, but this is where we decide what is sensitive or not. And it also helps us create retention labels, which through retention policies, we can make sure that we keep information on hand and that we don't delete it, and make sure that it will still be on hand the day we need it to be on hand. Now, the other portion is that fourth portion now, where not only do we have identity management, we have device management, we have data management, but now we have AI application management. So because we want to know where those applications are, or why they're in our environment, and what they're accessing, as I said, because they're not going to be respecting the security, all the DLP that we've, spent so much time setting up, because we wanted to set up those barriers of protection within our environment to make sure that we don't have exfiltration of data, that we don't accidentally send confidential or private data outside of the walls of the organization. In this case, the walls being an analogy, because we're really talking about the 365 cloud environment. So let's look at getting ready for AI. So what are some of the associated risks with AI, and what are some of the security concerns, and what are some of the building blocks behind it? Now, these are stats from Microsoft illustrating the fact that from surveys that they've done, that 58% of organizations have concern around the lack of visibility into the unsanctioned use of generative AI. So those shadow AI, those apps that possibly, someone has decided to come and set up within the environment, where no one is aware of it, and you have no idea what it's doing. Lack of control to protect data shared in AI. 43% say that's a concern, but we've already seen that by Copilot, using through the use of Copilot, I should say, because it was developed by Microsoft, it is aware and it's able to use and navigate those informational barriers, those securities that have been set up. And then the other one is, according to them, by 2027, at least one global company will see its AI deployment banned by a regulator for non-compliance or for not having data protection in regards to AI governance legislation. So this would be a case where, yes, you can use Copilot today with business standard, but there might come a day where, unfortunately, you will need at least business premium to use Copilot, because you will have to set up those security controls in your environment in order to legally be able to use Copilot or AI, whichever the case may be. Now, as we mentioned before, visibility into the AI applications can lead to situations where we have no idea, you know, what that app is, who is using it, or it could be a compromised user identity because we don't have, strong enough authentication and authorization mechanisms put in place, which in the end could lead to information being sent out, against the organization's policies, unfortunately. In this case, PII or private identifiable information, which, you could be relieving, whether I know some of you in Ontario, we have HIPAA. So you have to be sensitive to that. And unfortunately, those are just realities, of those sectors. And, those clients operate in those environments. So therefore, they're bound by those requirements. Now, these building blocks, Steve showed them before. So minimally, we're talking Microsoft Enter ID because obviously we need to authenticate. We need a product that's able to use Copilot or link to Copilot. And then we have our applications. Obviously these are all Microsoft applications. So all of these applications sit on top and as well are able to, as we can see here, are also able to interact with those other services, data loss prevention, SharePoint Online, SharePoint site restrictions, and OneDrive for Business, and as well all the other possibilities of API connectors. Because as Steve mentioned before, you can have AI connect to your 365 environment, but we can also have Copilot connect to external data sources. But the problem behind that is if you allow that, now you have to manage the security of those data sources at the other end, because now you're going to be pulling in results of other data, which will probably not have any security, behind it. And you could be responsible for exfiltration of data at that moment as well. Yeah, this slide we saw a little bit from before from Steve. What comes with Business Premium, collaborate in real time through Teams, enable secure access and protect identity. But we'll go into that a little bit deeper. So this is all the Teams aspect of things, which as well respects all the data barriers we put in place, which is also I'll say Copilot friendly because Copilot is also able to interact with the information found in Teams. Then we have, as well as for identity access, we have MFA, which business standard will do, but that's all it will do. It does not do conditional access. So we're not able to apply those additional requirements, those additional measures that we want people to go through. And I really think every time I start thinking about that, to partners and their customers, and because we get calls, what, what can we do to make things more secure? So, right away, the question always revolves around security. And Business Premium is one of those hero SKUs. We'll see it later on because some of the features it has, through Enter ID P1, we get conditional access. We also get a CAL, a client access license. So, meaning you could set up virtual machines in Azure. Let's say if you want to move the accounting system from on-prem. This is one scenario that the uh, the 365 can help you with that. We see a lot of instances where this happens. Is they move the accounting system, which was basically residing on one machine. So the application is local, the data is local. So at that point, that machine gets put into the cloud, and then people can access that machine from home or from the office. And it just, it's another way of making things more accessible, giving more flexibility to people. But in order to do that, a user needs a client access license, like in the days of terminal server, or I mean, terminal server is still used, but this is that same CAL, that client access license, and that is included with Business Premium. So there's no additional cost when we want to set that up. Now, Microsoft Business Premium also comes with Defender for Office 365 P1. What that gives us is safe links and safe attachments, and as well as a user impersonation. So when we talk about safe links and safe attachments, is you still have the standard protection from Exchange Online protection that every business license has. A standard has it as well, but we take it a step further with Defender for Office, in that we now had a safe links and safe attachment level of protection. So what that means is if attachments are sent through email, Microsoft will go inside that attachment, we'll open it up, we'll go look at the information in that attachment, and we'll determine whether or not it's behaving. We'll call it normally, or not behaving in a bizarre fashion. The content is safe. Okay, I can let the user have it. So then it becomes available in that user's email. And as well for safe links, when a user clicks on a link, that link is validated by Microsoft before giving the user full access to that website behind it. So Microsoft goes and accesses the website, looks at the landing page, looks at the code, make sure it's safe. It doesn't have any funky or fishy happening there. And if everything is safe, then it lets the user proceed to that website. And then when we talk about user impersonation, that's really interesting because we can in the user impersonation list is we can put those key people in the organization. And the example I always give, it's that person that's responsible for approving payments or transfers of money, because that's a typical phishing scam. It's always about the money. So in this case, what we can do is we can say, okay, that's Frank. Well, that's Frank at mybusiness.com. Okay, so we're going to put his user in the user impersonation list, and anyone sending an email to that account, to that email account. But what happens is usually is the from is really not that real account. So any permutation of letters within the username or within the domain name, Microsoft will examine that in detail to make sure that someone is not trying to be smart by reversing two letters within the domain name, let's say, or stuff like that, or in the username, just to make it look legit, because the user sees that, oh, that's Frank. Boom, they click on it. But no, it was my business, but my business written with MI instead of MY, let's say. And it's a you would think that someone would have caught that, but stranger things have happened, and unfortunately, the end result is that business is now out of thousands of dollars because they've transferred a payment to someone that they shouldn't have had to. Now here we have Azure Information Protection, which we've already talked about. That's the creation of those sensitivity labels. And then we have Office 365 DLP. So within the Office apps, what we're able to do as well, when someone opens a document, let's say in Word, that has a sensitivity label, let's say of confidential, well, when they open that document, that there'll be a banner across the top of the document where it says confidential, and you can actually choose to put other writing in there, just to have it a little more explanatory for the users in the end user, I should say. We also have Microsoft Defender for Business, which comes and elevates the base Defender for Windows, which is found on the workstation. So it gives you added protection. It gives you an EDR. It gives you attack surface reduction, and it also links it to the Defender console within the 365 environment. So you can see what has happened on that workstation. If there are any threats, what the score. Security score level is of that machine, what has happened. There are even automatic mitigation mechanisms that are in there as well. So very, very useful. And then we have our Intune device management, where we can control what we do in here with Intune. We used to, well, we still do. You can create your security policies in Intune, and Intune will push it to the device because Intune is anything you want to push down to a device. Whether it be an application, a configuration. In this case, we can even deploy Defender for Business automatically using Intune. With a couple of little tweaks. And as well, Business Premium also comes with Autopilot, where we could just do an out-of-the-box deployment of a machine. Of course, we have to create our images beforehand, but there again, you have to evaluate depending on the size of your client or how many machines they have or how often they renew their hardware fleet. It might be interesting. All right, so let's look at Copilot adoption. Now, the real interesting steps is always, does I, the customer is going to say he needs it, but does he really need it? Or maybe it's you wanting to approach the customer and sit down with the customer to see if he really needs it. So you sit down and you help the customer define a vision, identify key scenarios on how Copilot will be used. So that's where those little videos this morning from Steve were quite helpful. It just shows you what the possibilities are, of using Copilot from within those different applications. And because here we're talking about Copilot from Microsoft 365, the videos obviously in question were from applications that are found within the 365 suite of applications. And then the important thing is, like Steve was mentioning, is train users on how to use prompts. Unfortunately, is not writing a prompt properly will you just won't get a proper result. But there's ways to learn that, and through that the Copilot Lab, well, people can learn how to use it, can refine or sharpen their prompts, and ideally can become quite proficient in the use of Copilot. But we always introduce that security level where we're thinking of data protection and restriction policies, and we're also thinking of endpoint security with Defender for Business. And once again, into the discussion, we bring conditional access back to the forefront. All right, so let's look at data security, more poignantly, and information protection. So here we have a slide, and Steve already showed that slide before as well. It just gives you a quick visual of the really the differences with business standard, and or in some cases the lack of security that's associated with a business standard. This is where we see the results. As I was mentioning before, yes, it's all good. The user has access to Copilot. He has access to those SharePoint sites. We've set up, everything correctly. We've set up the labels. But now what happens is those outputs are going where? That's where the kicker is. You know, are we going to allow a user to print a result from a Copilot prompt which contains confidential information? Once they bring it into Excel, we still need to have that DLP present because he might want to send out that Excel file to someone just to say, hey, look what I found at work today. It's really interesting. But unfortunately, if we don't have those barriers in place, that information has just left the organization. So once again, our risky users and overprivileged, where we really want to make sure that if they're going to access resources, we don't want to put you know you know barriers to make the usage impossible. But we just want to make it safe. We want to make sure that people who are accessing the resources are who they say they are, and they actually have access to data that they should have access to. but we're also going to be able to know, what they've done while they were accessing the information, whether it's to sign-in logs and as well Copilot logs everything as well, so you can know when someone was using Copilot, what was it that they were doing at that moment. Here we see again the security side of things with the business premium. The idea is to have that data security, that data governance, and that risk and compliance posture, because we really want to make sure that, it is the user, the intended user. He's doing it from a safe device. Ideally, it's an organization's device that's Entra ID joined. He's not using it from a personal device. We just want to make sure that we make things as safe as possible. This slide is very interesting. Here we have those sensitivity labels. Now, by default, if we do nothing, everything is public because there's no restriction on any information. Anything that I have within 365, I can send to anyone at any time. There's just nothing stopping me from doing so. But we could start saying, okay, let's start applying let's say a sensitivity label, and we'll, for the, in purpose of this explanation, we'll call it general. And for us in this instance, general is information that can be accessed or communicated to only by people within the organization. So, there are ways to limit access, and there are ways to limit how the information can be transmitted to other people. Now, we could have one that's called confidential, obviously. We could have, quite complicated scenarios where, let's say, we could have a SharePoint site where, user A, B, and C have access to all the files. But there's a couple of files in there that, are really more than a regular, they're sensitive in a sense, but beyond just that regular sensitivity level, and we might not want user C to access a couple of those files, where we could go manually and go and put that confidential label on those couple of files and restrict user C from accessing them, being able to access those files. Or then we have the restricted one where the example I always give is, we could put a sensitive label on some information where we really, really want to make sure that it's only, upper management, the president and VPs that have access to that information, because we definitely don't want this information to leak out. And then we'll look at this dot chart. And this is really clear and concise to the point. And here we see everything that Business Premium can do. And here we see what Business Standard doesn't do. As far as identity and access management, we have our endpoint management, and then we have our data management, our data security and compliance. So, I think it's quite clear that, as Steve was mentioning, yes, you can do Copilot, interrogations of your data with a standard license, but there's really, there's no security behind it, unfortunately. And this is another way of presenting that within these categories, within data classification, within data labeling, within data access, data protection, and data lifecycle. So here we see, BP is business premium, and here S is standard. So we're able to compare, here at these levels, which one is able to do what. But in this case here, standard can't do this, standard can't do this, standard can't do this, it can't do this, it can't do that. So unfortunately, it just, there's a bit of a lack, using a business standard license, in, well, I say in a secure fashion. You just cannot use it in a secure fashion because it doesn't have the security that permits you to use it in a, to use your tenant in a secure fashion, unfortunately. This is the know your data. That's always very important before you Well, people say you should really know this before you launch into Copilot. But in reality, even if you're not going to, use Copilot, you should know your data and where it is. Just let me see. I'm looking at the chat. I guess Copilot for these users still won't have access to the SharePoint. They use access to. Whoops, I didn't mean to do that. Yeah, correct. Yeah, we can restrict access to to Copilot, because obviously Copilot will access the data on behalf of the user because it's the user launching it. So it's accessing data as if it was the user. So yes, in that case, you would be using SharePoint site restrictions, which is really, really the minimum. But ideally, if we really have, sensitive information, we should really think about data labels. All right, so know your data. So what is sensitive within my data? So this is a good, here's my laser back. Oh, there we go. All right, so what is sensitive? Define what is sensitive to the organization. Generic or customer specific? Well, obviously company secrets, highly confidential, PII, and they are when you set up sensitivity labels, there are some preset sensitivity labels for personal identifiable information, for financial information, relative to banking and all that. So you don't really have to start from scratch. There are pre-made models in there which can help you get going quite rapidly. You really, you don't need to set up all the necessarily criteria. But what you can do from that label, though, is you're able to determine the parameters behind the usage. If I have a document that has, let's say, a highly confidential sensitivity label, I might say, I'm sorry, but you can't send that document by email. Just as simple as that. Or you can't print it. That way, it's for your eyes only, and it's only on your screen. I really don't want to take a chance of that information, getting outside of the walls of the organization. Yes. Oops, hang on, sorry. Yes. I'm just going to answer the chat here. Yeah, the question was if a user has Office 365 E3 as because they needed a 100 gig mailbox and changed to Business Premium, can they buy an add-on to increase from 50 to 100 gig? The answer is yes. You can add an Exchange Online plan too and add it to the user, but you need to, let's say, deactivate. But you need to under the application side of things for that user. Once you assign it the Exchange Online Plan 2, take the check mark off beside the Exchange Online Plan 1, because unfortunately 365 is not intelligent enough to realize to use the most beneficial one of the two. It will continue to be limited to 50 gig even though you put the check mark beside the Exchange Online Plan 2. All right, so where does the data live? Hang on, having issues with my laser. There we go. Where does the data live? Do we know? I've created inventory of all my data repositories. It was very important to know what those data, where that data, where it was before it came into 365, but it's also important to know where it is within 365 because you can configure Copilot. You can restrict it to certain data sources. You can tell it to only be able to go and look for information in certain sites. You can restrict it It doesn't have unfeathered access to everything by default. Now, once again, we're at the data. Who has access to all that data? How is it used? What is the risk? And when we talk about risk, this is where the customer and you along with them have to make that judgment call. And if he says, you know what, we're a very, very small company, uh, we don't have, much information. We're only like three people, and everybody knows everybody else's job. Everybody's able to do everybody's job. So, in that case, putting restrictions or sensitivity labels to keep people from seeing things, or trying to create multiple SharePoint sites to limit access to information, it just wouldn't be practical. And the client, does not want to fork out for a business premium. Well, in that case, you would say, okay, well, you've basically convinced yourself you're low risk, so you go ahead and enable Copilot, unfortunately. But in a case where you can say, okay, you know what, we're going to we're thinking that um, we're going to put in Copilot, but maybe we're only going to do it for a limited number of users, and we're going to see how things go, and we'll adjust from there. Or you can say, you know what, I really don't like taking chances. I'm not a risk taker. We're high risk. We are not implementing Copilot, at large, or even for a test group of users. We're going to go ahead before we launch Copilot, make it accessible to everyone. We're going to come in and put in all those security controls. And here we have the protect portion is one, once again, through all the security mechanism, we have data lifecycle controls. That's where those for compliance purposes, we need to keep those records for X number of years. Data protection. Not only can we put those sensitivity labels and have them, appear at the top of, people's documents when they open them in Word, but we can even put in a watermark of inside a document. And the beauty is with all those sensitivity labels is that it's not like in the old days where we had our on-prem file server, where we had NTFS permissions, and the permissions were linked to the operating system and to the file only as long as it lived on the hard drive that was managed by that file server. Once you made a copy on your local desktop, there was no security to that file. NTFS permissions just did not follow. But with sensitivity labels, that is not the case. The restriction is built into the metadata of the file, and therefore it follows the file on its journey. So, and it can only be removed by the person who put that restriction in place. And we talk about data access control. We really talk about oversharing, and that's where it becomes interesting in SharePoint. Do you really want to allow anyone to create a link to a file and make that available externally to someone? Data labeling we talked about, and data classification. Which data am I going to consider as being sensitive? So it really, really is important to know your data. Uh, Will Copilot work with an account with OP2? I would assume that it would. I wouldn't see why not. Um, what if that person leaves the company? Uh, that in the case of a label being applied to a document? If I'm not mistaken, the the admin of the tenant can always override, because someone has to have that function, has to be built in, because otherwise it wouldn't make sense, because then you would end up with a situation where documents from within the organization just would become unusable if someone left the organization, for example. So here we have the slide on decide your decide on the path forward, make a rational choice based on evidence and actual data. So that's where you need to sit down and have that discussion, to make sure and have the client understand, what is risk and what, are some of the situations that could happen. So, basically, as we mentioned before, the client decides that, to them, they've, they're everything is an acceptable risk in the sense because, we don't handle confidential data. But in reality, here in Quebec, with Law 25, you're responsible for information that you hold, whether or not it is your own information. So, some people, need to really perhaps reconsider what an acceptable risk is, or if the client, might consider their situation as a medium risk, or we had, like before we mentioned, that not acceptable risk. In that case, we decided to implement, all the security measure possibles that we could. Protect user access. Now, this one is very interesting. Is once again, do we really want to rely strictly on a username and a password to provide access to data, to provide access to the use of Copilot? So, this is where, you need to have those discussions. Um, we really need and this I already talked about it before, about, using Enter ID or a single ID and those IDs synchronized and who has access. Once again, it's much easier to manage access to files using groups than using, granular users. Typically in SharePoint, that's the other problem, is when people are allowed to add users on their own, then the admin, starts to lose control because it becomes impossible to know who has access to what site, unless you go practically site by site. Whereas if you use groups, you create a security group in your admin center, and you say, group to access which site, and then that's that site, or you can even, different groups for different access levels. Is access control, do we have access policies, as I was mentioning before, based on location? I can actually restrict the physical location from where you can access the resources. Is access fast and simple? Well, that goes a little bit back to here, when the identities are synced, then users can use the same identity, or do we want to force them to re-enter their credentials? What if data is exposed? This is the really interesting one, and that's where you should really, I would say that, this is one of the interesting ones where you could really base that risk discussion on. What happens if this information gets out into the wild? What is the impact on the business? And we often say that, it doesn't really, it might not be monetarily today, it'll be your reputation, but eventually, your reputation will be degraded enough that it will become a money issue long run. So review access, make sure we use all the tools that we can review who is accessing what through all the available logs. We talked about the seamless access, the SSO. Security adaptive, once again, those conditional access, they come back time after time, but unfortunately, they're really useful to limit those access. User access, create different groups. Okay, I already sold that punch. So we talked about that as well. And then user identity, synchronize on-prem identities to the cloud. Bit of the same information, but just presented in a different way, and not necessarily, maybe as overloaded, more succinct and more to the point. Where this one you could show that one to the client, and then by category, you're able to see right away, what can be done or what should be taken into consideration. Identity and access management. Once again, we see that, whether it's business basic or business standard, besides MFA, there's just nothing we can do. But with premium, through the use of conditional access, This is very interesting. Near real-time access policy enforcements, evaluate critical access. We can even do another aspect, which is super interesting. It's called continuous access evaluation in a conditional access. Is what we can do in there is, let's say we decided to implement an extra security measure through our conditional access, but we want that additional measure to apply immediately to all users, and we want to force them to re-authenticate to use this additional security mechanism that we've implemented in a conditional access. Well, by default, if we make a change in a conditional access, the user that new security measure, let's say, will not be imposed on the user until their session token runs out, and the refresh token, demands another session token, and only at that moment will they need to re-authenticate. But the default is 90 days, and I don't want to wait 90 days. And by the way, you can also through conditional access, you can change that to token, from 90 days, you can make it 30 days if you want. But the continuous access evaluation, what's interesting about that is what it will do is it will force the user upon the next login, whether the session token has expired or not, it will force them to re-authenticate. And at that moment, they will have no choice but to go through that new, security measure that you've implemented or that you've, you know, recently modified in your conditional access policy. Secure access, here we go. This is a device security. So which devices are accessing, your 365 environment? Are these devices managed? Or, are we managing them through Intune? Are we able to, remotely wipe the machine as we talk about here? Do we want to not permit or revoke access to non-compliant devices? Are all the applications on that device up to date? Are security policies in place to protect device from vulnerabilities and threats to improve compliance? Because are the devices up to date? Have all the latest patches been done on those devices? And then once again, what is the risk? What could happen, if that device is compromised? What would happen to the company data? That's necessarily possibly on the device itself, or if the device is compromised enough, it could be used to access corporate data. So we really want to manage those devices. So what we do is re-enroll them into device management. In this case, we're talking about Intune, which comes with Business Premium. And here we have manage apps, deploy app update policies. We want to make sure that the applications that are used by devices are up to date. Not only do we want the operating system to be up to date, but we want our applications to be up to date. Make sure that our code, doesn't have any security issues behind it. Deploy device compliance policies. That's what I was saying before. We can make sure that my devices are up to date if I use compliance through Intune to make sure that my device has the latest and greatest update if I want. I can actually specify down to the dot 10.0 dot something to make sure that my Windows 10 device really has that latest update, because I really don't want to take a chance. And here we have again by category of our devices, are they managed, our apps, our security, and our risks. Endpoint management. This is where it gets interesting. So with Business Premium, we're able to manage the devices, and through Intune, we can manage it. Through Intune, we can push, applications to it. We can actually manage the updates of those applications, and we can wipe all work content, and we can revoke work access on non-compliant devices. But what Business Premium gives us as well on top of that, as I mentioned before, it gives us MDB, Microsoft Defender for Business, which basically comes and elevates the Defender for Windows that exists on the computer that comes built in the operating system provided by Microsoft. So we can make sure, once again, through Intune, through our compliance, or mobile or device management, in this case, not mobile, but strictly device management, we can make sure that the antivirus is able, up to date, and cannot be disabled. We can make sure the firewall is up. Now, these are usually two of the things that I usually suggest to set up, as a compliance requirement in Intune, and then put that compliance requirement inside of your conditional access, so that way people are accessing the environment. Not only have they authenticated using MFA, they might have been restricted using an IP, but you can all. I also usually like to impose to them a compliance requirement for their device, which minimally at least your antivirus and your firewall. But the interesting part about Defender for Business is it gives us an EDR and also detects interfacing devices. Do you have traffic coming to a machine directly from the internet? Let's say on port 3389, because people are using remote desktop on the machine. And as I mentioned before, it has attack surface reduction, but it also automatic attack disruption. Whereas I was saying that it has these automatic these mechanisms that kick in, and as well, it's able to detect because all the devices are registered inside the Defender portal. So Defender is aware of these devices. They're registered. Devices are communicating with Defender. So Defender starts to see a behavior that happens on one machine, sees the same behavior on two machines, or maybe three machines. Well, what it's going to do at some point is it's going to go ahead on all the other machines, and it's going to try to disable in advance or compromise that behavior from happening on all these other machines, because it's suspicious in nature and definitely outside of the norm. Now, secure apps used to access Microsoft Copilot. Now, those are those shadow AI apps. Here we talk about shadow IT, but like I said, sometimes we also refer to it as shadow AI. You know, we really want to make sure that those applications, are approved, because otherwise, anyone, would be able to go around the securities that Copilot. Copilot is not set up with those securities, but Copilot is able to recognize the securities that we've put in place inside the tenant. But if we allow an artificial intelligence application, to roam free within our 365 tenant, then it's going to bypass all of these securities that are in place. And unfortunately, we might end up with some less than desirable results. So once again, you know, make design decisions for the following topics. According to devices, do we want users to access apps from personal devices? Do we want them to access apps from third-party managed devices? Do users access Microsoft 365 app from completely unmanaged device? Manage devices that are not even enrolled in Intune. And then longer applications or security, do we want to increase the level of security on the device itself? Do we just, can the person just use their 365 username and password to unlock their computer at work? Or do we want to impose a PIN, a fingerprint, or Face ID if it has a built-in camera? We want to augment that level of security even on the devices that are used, to get access to data, but more importantly, to use Copilot, which will be given access to data. So with Business Premium is we're able to control the applications that actually are able to run on devices. We're actually able as well to restrict the use of Microsoft 365 apps and teams. We can even prevent of saving files, including those generated by Copilot. So that's why I always gave that explanation on, someone's using their device, their computer. They call upon Copilot, a Copilot, uh, you know, uh, give me the rundown on the last meeting, what is common with the notes from this meeting, and as well as the email we got, following the meeting. And then Copilot will, from there, will produce that result. But then, if you save that result on an unprotected device, then like I said, that information is now could be made accessible to anyone who accesses the device for some reason, or if the device comes lost, then we're not able to work to wipe all work related content on it. So there really is a discussion to be had on, this is on the application side, but applications run on devices. So, indirectly we see here that, it sort of comes back to the device in a certain way. All right, so that concludes my security portion, and as well the data migration portion, and as well we had Steve that introduced to us earlier, all of what Copilot is, and as well discussing the incentives that are in place, not only for to drive the business premium discussion, but also to drive the Copilot discussion. Are you there, Steve?
Absolutely,
All right.
absolutely. I can share a few things with you. Number one, hopefully you enjoyed the training. I think that we tried to do our best. There's more to come. Copilot. We're just at the start of Copilot, and I would encourage you to, if you haven't done this prior to this meeting, that there's going to be a second um, Copilot training, which is available on March 14th, a month from now, exactly. By the way, just want to wish happy Valentine's Day to everybody. Just enjoy it with your loved ones. We certainly love our partners, so it's all love, on our side. So you can register, and actually for the second presentation, just make sure that you register so you get the second part. We will put the recording and as well as the documentation on the partner portal and the documentation portion of the partner portal. Also, if you've had just want to share one other thing. If you've hadn't had the chance, but or because we've actually did send it sometime last week, so I just want to fetch that email instead of sharing my complete screen. Just bear with me with a second. If you haven't had the opportunity, we announced our um, altitude conference in Toronto on May 7th. Hopefully, just thumbs up the people that actually saw this announcement. That'd be great to know that you've actually seen this. Okay, perfect. Thank you. Can always count on Victor, Travis, and Daniel. So yes, so we sent the convention, the conference on May 7th. It's going to be unbelievable. I'm planning on doing maybe a training before altitude, maybe a day before a full day training on Copilot. So limited space is available. I'm going to give you a hint. Registration is free. That's definitely more than we can say for the one that we're having in Quebec and Laval. It's the one in Quebec Laval is multi-day. This one is just one day, but it will be amazing. It's at the Sheraton. We're going to get some amazing speakers, great people from Microsoft, a few people from IT Cloud, a little few people here and there. But most definitely, you're going to see conference, workshops, certifications, trainings, happy hour, prizes, awards, all that good stuff is going to be available. Please register. If you want us to continue having some of these conferences, so we're investing a whole lot to make this a wonderful day, and we're putting a lot of effort as well so that you guys get amazing training. So go ahead, register. You're gonna get. Oh, didn't get the email. Post a link to the event here. I'm gonna go ahead. Where is that? Just gonna just go ahead here. Here's the PDF. And is there a registration link? I think there is registration. Copy. Who's asking to get on the mailing list? Emily, I'm gonna share my email address here. Just shoot me an email. I'll make sure that you're on the mailing list. Excellent. So thank you very much. Don't forget to register for the next training session. Afterwards, there's a third one. That one will be booked on a one-on-one basis to be able to go through some more some presentations that are maybe more specific to your current business. If you haven't purchased your own Copilot license, I encourage you to do so, and I encourage you to start talking about it to your customers. So have an exceptional day for the ones that are on the West Coast. Rest of the afternoon for the ones that are on the East Coast. Have a nice evening. So thank you very much, everyone.